Congressman Brendan Boyle, thanks for joining us. We just had some news from the U.S. Census Department that affects pretty drastically the state of Pennsylvania. Can you tell me what we heard today from the Census Bureau and what does it mean?
That's right, Chris. Today, the Census Bureau officially announced the apportionment data for each of the 50 states, and it confirmed what was long projected that Pennsylvania will lose a seat in the House of Representatives for the next decade. It will take effect with the elections of 2022. And this really continues a trend that started 60, 70 years ago of congressional districts migrating from northeastern and Midwest states to states in the Sun Belt. So the good news is Pennsylvania only lost one seat. There was the potential danger of losing two. So I look at today as good news that we only lost one. I also look at it good news because the Census Bureau in the Q&A announced that Pennsylvania gained about 2.5% in terms of our population. So we are growing as a state. The challenge is states like Florida, Texas, Arizona are just growing at a greater rate.
And is it purely based on population?
Yeah, the census is based purely on population. We've had one every 10 years, beginning with 1790 and continuing every 10 years in the year that ends in the zero. So last year in 2020, even throughout a pandemic, the census was conducted. Millions of Americans, including myself, filled it out for the first time online. And they just confirmed, the Census Bureau did, that we now are a nation of 331 million people. Although, interestingly, the country grew by 7.5% this decade, which is the second lowest growth rate that we've had as a nation in our nation's history.
So, uh, Pennsylvania loses, what do we have now? 17?
Yeah, we currently have 18 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, so we will drop down to 17, which means now that come that map you see every 4 years in presidential elections, instead of having 20 electoral votes, we will only have 19 beginning with the next presidential election.
So what happens now? Where do we lose that seat and where does it come from? Where does that leave you and your district?
Yeah, well, this will be something I will be paying attention to because it does possibly impact, whether or not I will have a seat. Although the good news is now the Census Bureau didn't release this data today. They didn't release the county level data. They only released it at the state level. But all of the projections have shown over the last decade that Philadelphia, every suburban Philadelphia county, every Lehigh Valley county, and Lancaster and York counties continue to grow in population and grow at a pretty healthy clip, while almost every county in Western Pennsylvania has lost population. This has been going on really for several decades. So, what happened 10 years ago is you saw Western Pennsylvania shrink by a congressional seat. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw the seat that we lose come out of either North Central PA or Western PA. Again, it's really dictated by the numbers more than politics because each person is entitled to be represented in one congressional district.
So for someone outside the Beltway, not politically, for the rank or the regular mom and dad who are at home, what does this mean? Does it mean funding for my schools, funding for the health, what the roads? What does this mean to the regular person?
Yeah, that's a good question because at the end of the day, people care about, okay, how does this impact me and my life? The reason why I was attempting to encourage everyone in Philadelphia and everyone in my district to make sure they filled out the census to get counted is because so many federal formulas that are linked to dollars are based on population. Now, I'm pretty proud of the fact, actually, according to the latest projection, not the official data, but according to last year's projection, My congressional district actually gained the most out of any in the state of Pennsylvania. So what that means is when the federal government is allocating dollars for education programs or dollars for housing programs or dollars for any sort of grant, they will be basing it on total population. And so the fact that we're losing a congressional seat does harm us in terms of our representation in the House of Representatives and come presidential elections. But it won't harm us too much in terms of federal funding because that's really based on a different metric. It's based on our overall population, which is continuing to grow. Again, it's just not growing as quickly as those states in the Sun Belt.
So what happens now? I understand now this has to go through some state processes. What
Yeah.
happens now? What are we going to be seeing in the coming months?
Yeah, well, so it's both a federal story and a state story, right? Because the US Census Bureau hasn't released everything. Today was really the first day. They released the official certified number for nationwide, which is a little over 331 million, and they released the numbers for each of the 50 states. What now has to happen over the next several months is the Census Bureau will be releasing more data, including at the county level, even at the precinct level. And then in the fall, each of the 50 state legislatures, or in some states as a commission, will go about drawing up new maps. They will be drawing up the congressional maps as well as the state legislative maps based on this data, and they will take effect for next year's elections.
All right, Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you for the census lesson and breaking down what it means for Pennsylvania as we lose a seat in the House of Representatives. Thanks for your time and thanks for your service in Congress.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it, Chris.